Before we begin, I want to clarify the scope of this video. This discussion focuses on coercive control, a form of abuse that often goes unseen and unaddressed by our legal system. I briefly referenced the Michael McKee case as a recent example that has raised public questions, but this video does not speculate about guilt, evidence, or legal outcomes. Everything shared here reflects my own perspective, based on personal observation and publicly available documented research. My goal is to explain the pattern, how coercive control works, why it's often minimized, and why fear doesn't always look the way people expect. With that context, let's begin.
Hi, everyone. I'm an Ohio native, born and raised. I don't live anywhere near Columbus, but like a lot of people, I've been seeing the recent Columbus case involving Michael McKee discussed everywhere. And for me, the case wasn't something I wanted to analyze necessarily. It was something that triggered a larger conversation I've wanted to have for a long time. So I want to be very clear up front. This video will not speculate about guilt or outcomes. As with any ongoing case, all parties are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty, and much of the information has not yet come out. What I do want to talk about is the pattern that cases like this bring up, because it is a pattern many people live inside, often without language, protection, or understanding. When people hear the term coercive control, they often think it means something dramatic or obvious: physical violence, screaming, threats. But coercive control usually doesn't start there. It's not one incident, it's not one text, it's not one argument. It's an environment of the threat of violence. It's a pattern of behavior designed to create fear, dependence, and compliance over time, often without leaving visible marks. This can include monitoring, intimidation, isolation, unpredictability, subtle threats, showing up coincidentally, making someone feel watched, cornered, or trapped. And here's the part that gets missed a lot. Coercive control doesn't require explicit threats. It works through what I think of as the shadow of violence. The understanding that harm is possible, even if it's never said out loud. One of the biggest reasons coercive control is misunderstood is because of power differentials, especially physical ones. Most women grow up with an awareness, sometimes conscious, sometimes background, that men are physically stronger. That awareness changes how fear works. I'll give you a very ordinary example. For years, I automatically locked my car door the moment I got in. No thought, no drama, just muscle memory. And my husband at the time used to get irritated about it. Not because he was cruel, but because he'd never lived with a baseline fear of being attacked. That's the gap. For a lot of men, vigilance is optional. For women, it's learned early and reinforced constantly. So when a woman says, "I'm afraid," she's often responding to pattern recognition, not imagination. That fear didn't come from nowhere. There's another part of coercive control that's hard to understand unless you've seen it up close. And that's the cycle of leaving and going back. Growing up, I saw this firsthand with a family member. As a child, I watched someone leave out of fear, genuinely afraid, terrified, actually, and seek safety. And every time it felt like this was it, like maybe this time things would change. But then she'd go back. And from the outside, that can look confusing, even frustrating. People ask, why would you return to someone who terrifies you? But when you're inside coercive control, leaving doesn't automatically end the fear. It often intensifies it. Because leaving means your abuser knows you're trying to escape. His control is slipping. The situation feels unstable and unpredictable. And for the person being controlled, that instability can feel more dangerous than staying. What I also saw, and this is important, is how powerless everyone else feels. Family members want to help, they want to protect, but unless the victim is ready and able to stay away and has real protection, there's very little outsiders can actually do. So coercive control doesn't just trap the victim, it traps everyone around them. Children, family, friends. Everyone lives in a state of tension, waiting for something to happen and hoping it won't. That's why telling someone to just leave misses the reality entirely. Leaving isn't the end of danger. For many women, it's the most dangerous point in the entire cycle. Our legal system is built around events: an assault, a violation, a crime that has already happened. But coercive control does its most dangerous work before the event. That's why so many victims hear from law enforcement, nothing's happened yet. There's been no crime committed. We can't do anything. Which is devastating because the fear is already real. Restraining orders are often offered as protection, and they can be helpful in some instances, but they don't physically stop someone who is determined to harm you. In the book, The Gift of Fear, security expert Gavin DeBecker talks about how restraining orders can give women a false sense of security. Not because they're bad, but because they don't address the underlying control dynamic. For someone whose power depends on access and intimidation, a restraining order can represent a final loss of control, and that's when risk can escalate. This ties into another well-documented reality. Victims of coercive control are often in the greatest physical danger when they decide to leave or have just left. Why? Because the abuser feels that his control is collapsing, his monitoring no longer works, his access is cut off, and as a result, the abuser may feel they have nothing left to lose. That's not speculation. That is pattern. Now, let's talk about stalking laws for a minute. The stalking laws, I agree, were an important step forward. They were lauded as an important step forward, and a lot of people were excited about it. Stalking laws do acknowledge that repeated, unwanted contact can be dangerous, but they still don't fully capture coercive control. Stalking laws tend to measure how many times something happened. Coercive control is about how much power one person has over another. It is subtle, it is cumulative, and it's often designed to stay just below legal trouble. So while these laws help in some cases, they often don't intervene early enough to prevent escalation. This leaves victims trapped in what I think of as an in-between state, where fear is real, but the system hasn't caught up yet. Many psychologists and trauma specialists recognize that living under coercive control can produce PTSD like symptoms, even without physical violence, because the body experiences it as an ongoing threat. When fear is constant, the nervous system adapts with hypervigilance, scanning, bracing, anticipating danger around every corner. And those adaptations don't just disappear when the situation ends. And this is why victims' reactions are so often misunderstood. From the outside, fear can look excessive. From the inside, though, it is survival. I want to touch briefly on culture because it matters. I used to watch Criminal Minds for years, like probably for 10 years, until I realized that episode after episode centered around women being hunted, tortured, and killed. At some point, I had to stop. Not because the show wasn't well made, but because it mirrors a reality women are already taught to anticipate. Women don't learn fear from one experience. They absorb it over a lifetime through stories, warnings, media, and lived experience. That's why fear doesn't come from nowhere. When we look back on cases where coercive control was eventually undeniable, like the case involving Nicole Brown Simpson, patterns that were minimized in real time become obvious in hindsight. Documented abuse, escalating fear, warnings that didn't lead to protection. Hindsight makes those patterns clear, but prevention requires recognizing them earlier. When we look at cases like Nicole Brown Simpson's, patterns that were minimized in real time often become unmistakable later. But this isn't just something we see in hindsight. We're seeing these dynamics play out right now in the present day. More recently, there's the case of Micah Miller. Following her death, family and friends alleged that she had been stalked, intimidated, and terrorized over an extended period of time by her estranged husband, John Paul Miller. In December 2025, he was federally indicted on charges including cyberstalking and making false statements to federal investigators. According to the indictment, the alleged stalking lasted more than a year, roughly 528 days, and included behaviors like tracking her movements, damaging her property, and online harassment. I want to be very clear here. An indictment is not a conviction. These are allegations that will be addressed in court. But the pattern being alleged is important because what's described isn't a single incident. It is prolonged monitoring, intimidation, and control. Exactly the kind of behavior that often gets minimized until something irreversible happens. And then we step back and look at cases currently being discussed, including the Columbus case involving Michael McKee. What stands out to me isn't conclusions, but similar warning patterns that raise the same questions we've seen before. Not about guilt, not about outcomes, but about how coercive control operates and how often it's recognized only after tragedy. I'm not making this video to accuse anyone. I'm making it to explain something that's often invisible. Coercive control lives in the space before the law intervenes. Fear is often informed, not irrational. And understanding patterns is not the same thing as assigning guilt. If this video helped you put language to something you felt but couldn't quite explain, that's why I made it. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you have thoughts you want to share, I do read every comment, and I'm interested in how this landed with you. And if this kind of pattern-based discussion is something you want more of, you're welcome to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.